Hey YouTube, My Darkness 85 here. What's up? Here's my Sky Striker deck profile. So here we go. We got free Sky Striker Ace Ray. Basically, not much else to say about it. All this does is help you go into your Sky Striker link monsters, like right over here. So it's pretty much self-explanatory. And every time one of these die, I believe, you can special summon one of these from your graveyard, I think. So it's a pretty good card. 1500 attack and defense. Not much else to say about it. You contribute this card, quick effect, to special summon one Sky Striker Ace monster from your extra deck to the extra monster zone. When this card is in your graveyard, if a face-up Sky Striker Ace link monsters you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of a opponent's card effect, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. You can only use its effect once per turn. So it's a really good card. It's a really good card to recycle, obviously. You also got two Dino Wrestler Panker whatever it's called. Basically, if your opponent controls more cards on the field than you do, you can, I believe, special summon this from your hand. You basically can only summon one of these once per turn this way. You contribute one Dino Wrestler monster on the field, including it itself, to target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. So basically, if you were to tribute this card, you can destroy one card on your opponent's side of the field. So it's a really good card. It's also a good monster at 2600 attack. So it's a really good card to have. It's one of the best cards in the meta game right now, in my opinion. Then you got the spell cards, free Striker, Mobilize Engage. Basically the main heart of the deck. Would you activate this? This basically searches out your other Sky Striker spells, like over here, for example. You could search for almost anyone you want, basically. So it's like the reinforcements of the army for the Sky Striker spell cards. Like, this card's going to get hit to 2 one day, I know it. Because after they hit multi-roll to 1, this card might be hit next in the next ban list because it's really good. It can help you get the stuff you need to help you win a duel with this build. You can get like a Widow Anchor, a multi-roll, a Hornet Drone, stuff like that. There's a lot of options. Then you got the Widow Anchor. Basically, its effect... One of its effects is it can negate one of your opponent's monster's effects. And if you have free or more spell cards in your graveyard when you activate this, you can also take control of that monster until the end phase. So it's a really good card to have. And then you got the Shark Cannon. Basically, if you have 3 or more spell cards in the graveyard, you can special summon that monster to your field instead. So if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, you can activate this and use it as a monster reborn on your opponent's monster in your graveyard instead of banishing it if you only have less than 3 spell cards. So it's a really good like, you know, way to rob your opponent of trying to make a comeback. Like, if, for example, you had this face down, your opponent plays like a card like Monster Reborn or something like that to target one of their best monsters, you could just... So once they activate Monster Reborn, you can simply activate this after they declare the target they're going to bring back. You activate that, banish that monster, or bring it back to their field. Their card effect fizzles. So it's a really good card to have, believe it or not. Then you got the 2 Sky Striker Airspace Area 0. So basically what this card does is you can target one other card you control. Then you excavate the top 3 cards of your deck. And if you do, you can add 1 excavated Sky Striker card to your hand and also shuffle the rest back into the deck. And then if you excavated a Sky Striker card, send the targeted card to the graveyard. If this card in the field zone is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon 1 Sky Striker Ace monster from your deck, which is basically the Sky Striker Ray monster right here. And then this other effect is... You can only use each effect once per turn. So it's a really good card to have. So if this were to be destroyed, you could summon this directly from your deck to the field and go into one of your Sky Striker Link monsters, obviously. So it's a really good card to have. And it's another good way to add a Sky Striker spell card from your deck to your hand if you get one of the spell cards among the free excavated cards via the effect. So it's a really good card to have. Then you got the 1-ubs, the multi-roll, Hornet Drone, Afterburner, Eagle Booster, Jamming Waves, and the Hercules base. So basically, it's not much to say about these guys. This is pretty good. The reason why this went to 1 because it's so good. Basically, what this does is you could target one other card you control, send that card to the graveyard. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the spell card activations for the rest of the turn. even if this card leaves the field. So basically, you could set Sky Striker spells with different names from your graveyard up to the number of Sky Striker spells you activated this turn while this card is face up on the field, but banish them when they leave the field. So basically, you could basically set a number of like Sky Striker spell cards from your graveyard face down, but they get banished after you use them. So that's the only downside. And also, your opponent can't activate anything in response to the other Sky Striker spell card activations, even if this leaves the field. So this is another good bonus. This is why this card got hit to 1 in the first place. Hornet Drones basically gives you a token in your extra monster zone that you can use that token to summon one of these guys. So it's a really good card to have. It only works if you have no monsters in your main monster zone. So, you know what I mean? It's pretty good though. Then the Afterburner, its effect is you can target one face-up monster on the field and destroy it. Then if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, you can destroy one spell and trap on the field. So it's a really good card to have, basically. So it's like either a Smashing Ground, or no, it's either like a Fissure, Tribute to the Doomed, or it's Mystical Space Typhoon if you have 3 or more spells on the field. Then you got the Eagle Booster. Basically what this card does is if you control no monsters in your main monster zones, target one face-up monster on the field, and that target is unaffected by card effects this turn except its own. And if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, it can't be destroyed by battle this turn. So basically, if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, it can't be destroyed by battle. Its other effect is it can't be targeted by card effects till the end of the turn, except for its own effects. So it's a really good card to have. Another good card to save your monster. And then you got the Jamming Waves. This card's not that really good to run more than at 1. Some people run it at 2 or 3, but I like to run it at 1 because the effect's only useful in certain situations. If you control no monsters in your main monster zones, target one set spell and trap one on the field and destroy it. And if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you can destroy one monster on the field. So basically, the card's not really used as often as like the Engages or the Widow Anchors or stuff like that, but still a decent card to have at 1 at least. So it's really good. Then the last Sky Striker spell, Hercules Base. Basically what this card does, you can only activate this card if you control no monsters in your main monster zones. The equipped monsters cannot attack directly. It can make a second attack on monsters during each battle phase. If the equipped monster destroys a monster by its attack while you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, draw 1 card. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard by a card effect, you could target up to 3 Sky Striker cards in your graveyard except the Sky Striker Hercules Base and shuffle them into your deck. So basically, what this card does is it acts like a mini Pot of Avarice for your Sky Striker spells except for this card and returns them to your deck so you can use them again. And its other effect is when the monster equipped with this destroys a monster, you can, if you have 3 or more spell cards, I think it is, you can draw 1 card. So basically, it can add more resources to your hand right away each time it destroys a monster, and it can make a second attack during each battle phase on your opponent's monsters. But the only downside is the monster equipped with this can't attack your opponent directly. But still, it can help you like add cards to your hand so you can have more of a strategy to make a comeback. Now for the non-Sky Striker spells, you got the Free Mystic Mind. Basically, what this card does, it's like a double-edged sword. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack. But if they control more monsters than you do, you can activate effects or declare an attack. So basically, but once per turn during the end phase, if both players control the same number of monsters, this card's destroyed. So basically, this card's only good in certain situations. You gotta play this card right. Because if you play it wrong and your opponent forces you to have more monsters than you do, you're not going to win at all, basically. So you really got to time this correctly. But most of the time, this card will really work in your favor because mainly you only have 1 monster on board anyway, which is mainly one of your Sky Striker Link monsters. But if your opponent gets 1 monster on board and just ends his turn right there and not summon anything else, this card goes to the graveyard. So that's their one way of defeating it. So, you got to, make sure you use this card wisely. Because if you have more monsters than your opponent does, your monsters can't activate their effects or declare an attack. So that's not good. So you got to use this card really wisely. So it's a really good card, but it's like a double-edged sword. It's the same thing as cards such as Secret Village and Spellcaster. Like, if you don't have a Spellcaster monster on the field, you can't activate spell cards. So it's like a double-edged sword. Now we got the free Cosmic Cyclone. Basically, you pay 1,000 life points to target one spell, trap card on the field, and banish it. So this is really good if you go up against a mirror match. They try to activate Mystic Mind. You flip this over, banish it by paying 1,000. So it's a lot. There's a lot of good options you can target this card with. Basically, what this card does is it can really mess up your opponent's strategies. Like if they try to activate Secret Village or Spellcasters, you can flip this, pay 1,000. It's like a quick play, destroys, banish Secret Village. It's a lot of good plays you can do with this card. Free Foolish Burial Goods and Metaphor Fusions. So basically, the reason why you use this card is to dump this card into the graveyard and activate this card's effect by shuffling it back into your deck and drawing one card. So that's the only reason why people use most of the time Foolish Burial Goods, just to get this into the graveyard. So it's a really good card to have, obviously. So it's really cool. Then you got 1 Terraforming, 1 Reinforcement to the Army, 1 Upstart Goblin, and 1 Part of Desires. Now for the trap, you got there can only be 1. Basically, if each player can only control 1 monster of each type, if a player controls 2 or more monsters of the same type, they must send some to the graveyard so they control no more than 1 monster of that type. So basically, this card's really effective against a lot of meta decks like Thunder Dragons, what else? Or Crust, stuff like that. So basically, you activate this, they can't establish a heavy board. You can only have 1 monster of that certain type. But that goes for you too. But mainly, most of your monsters are warriors, so you have nothing to worry about with this card. But your opponent will. So, like, if they have decks that like to spam the field, they can't really do that. Because you can only control 1 of each type on the field. If they control more than that, they have to send monsters to the graveyard until they have 1 monster of that specific type. So, it's a really good card to have. And it's a really good card in the metagame right now. Then you got 1 Metaverse. Basically, when you activate this, you can activate 1 field spell from your deck and either activate it or add it to your hand. So basically, you activate this, you can either add your Mystic Mind to your hand or activate it directly onto the field right away. So this is a really good card. The reason why this card got hit to 1, because this card was really good with Altergeist a few months ago. Like, once you got a good board established, when your opponent goes into his draw standby phase, you can flip this, get Secret Village out. Your opponent doesn't have anything, basically. Your opponent would lose right there, basically. You know, it's a really good card to have. That's why it got hit to 1, and it might get banned eventually. That's why it's so good. Now we're going to go to the extra deck, then we're going to go into the side deck. So for the extra deck, we got the Sky Striker package. We got 1 Kagari, free Shinutsu, free Hayate, and 2 Kana. So basically, there's not much to say about the Sky Striker monsters. You all know what they do, so I'm not really going to say much about them. So basically, Kagari's effect is, if he's special summoned, you can target 1 Sky Striker spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand, and it gains 100 for each Sky Striker spell in your graveyard. And Shinuko's effect is, it gains 100 attack and defense for each spell in your graveyard, and once per turn, during the end phase of this card with special summon, you can add 1 Sky Striker spell card from your deck to your hand. And then Hayate's effect is, you can only special summon 1 Sky Striker Ace Hayate once per turn. This card can attack directly. After damage calculation in this card battled, you can send 1 Sky Striker card from your deck to your graveyard. So this is like a Foolish Burial. And last but not least, Kana's effect. If this card is special summoned, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. It cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. Each time you activate a Sky Striker spell card or its effect, gain 100 life points immediately after this card or effect resolves. So basically, this helps you gain life points, and you can make one of your opponent's monsters unable to attack until the end of their next turn. So it's a really good card to have. Now, for the other Link monsters, you got Nightmare Phoenix and Hilta, the Fire Charmer Ablaze. This is like a Mystical Space Typhoon, and what this card does basically, you could target 1 fire monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your zone this card points to. If this Link summon card is destroyed by battle or destroyed by an opponent's card effect while it's in the owner's monster zone, you can add 1 fire monster with 1500 attack or less from your deck to your hand. So, well, the second effect of this build, for this build, is irrelevant. But the first effect, if you go up against Fire Fist, you summon her, or any monster your opponent has that's a fire attribute, you could summon it to the zone, to a monster zone this card points to. So this is really good, basically. Then you got this card right here, the Link Freeze. This returns a card on the field back to the owner's deck by discarding one card from your hand when it's Link summoned. And what this one does, if this card is Link summoned, you can draw cards equal to the number of World Chalice monsters this card points to. You can only use this effect once per turn. And once per turn, you could send one card from each player's field to the graveyard. And if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one World Chalice monster from your hand. So the only effect that's relevant in this build would be the one that sends one card on each side to the graveyard, basically. Then you got the level 4s, Link 4 monsters, Topologic Bomber Dragon, and Borrelsaur Dragon. Self-explanatory. Now for the side deck, you got free Winged Dragon Raw Spear mode, which is pretty good. It can mess up your opponent's plans. If they have a good board, you can just tribute free of their monsters, special summon it to their field. So it's a really good card to have, and it's a really good side deck card in the metagame today, such as like Effect Veiler, Infinite Appearance, Evenly Matched. There can only be one. There's a lot of good cards in the metagame right now that could be game changers, and this is one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets hit to 2 or 1 eventually. Then you got free Ghost Ogre and 2 Effect Veiler. Basically, they're in the same category. This one, when your opponent activates an effect, you can discard this card from your hand to not only destroy that card. Basically, it destroys the card, but their effects still activate, but the card still gets destroyed. And this negates a monster effect on your opponent's turn by sending this card from your hand to the graveyard. So it's a really good card to have. So it's self-explanatory. Then you got the spell cards, free Mystical Space Typhoon, and 2 Twin Twister. More additional spell and trap card removal, especially if you go up against a mirror match or anything that runs a lot of spell trap cards, obviously. Then for the trap cards, you got 2 Full House. So this is really good if you have 2 spell and traps on your field, 2 spell and trap cards on your field, and your opponent has 3 set cards. You can activate this and destroy all 5 of them. It's a really good card. It's a really good game changer. So that's the build. I hope you all enjoy. More videos coming soon. Comment and subscribe. Later, guys.